was thinking if we just put it together, we just get that one video file.
Can you see me or hear me, David?
Can you hear me, Alice? How's the sound for you?
Stand on your chair.
Oh.
You don't have to.
Excellent.
Good morning. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, I just said yeah, all right. That's what I so we
How about now, Alice? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Hello. Right. Hello. Hello.
Basically, change the Yeah, I was going to say how we
Yeah.
How do you get something? Let's get those tubes in the air. Some of those guys have like skin,
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
I may have messed things up by logging in as a guest.
Hello.
Yeah, I did, because I didn't know how to.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
He's just trying to have a bite of freaking
Hello.
There he is.
Okay.
So I don't need this anymore. I left it lower.
I like the hat and the ponytail. Tommy, can you hear me? Hello.
There will be two people. David's pretty tech savvy. The other person
Hello.
is coming in at the last minute.
Okay.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, it should be fine if you're a guest still.
Yeah, if you can hear us, David, we're seeing that you're talking. We're still not getting the sound, and forgotten how your name's pronounced.
Mine? Oh, I'm Russ.
Russ.
Case is a weird one. Yeah.
So Russ is the AV person who's here. There we go. We're seeing you now.
Hello. Hello. Why can't we hear?
I'm connected to him by text as well and email. Oh, he's been texting.
Dramatic spikes.
So he said he'd reboot, so he's presumably done that.
This is the other guy? I think David's in here.
Uh-huh. I didn't see the other guy.
Oh, hello.
Rebooted, yes.
Yeah, that's
Now,
just David.
yeah, David must have muted his screen again, but still can't hear him.
Hello. Hello.
Test audio. David.
Oh, hello.
Okay, a little bit. Our volume is pretty high, so I'm...
Hello. 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 Hello.
Hi, we can hear you now.
Hear me?
Can you hear us,
me now?
David?
I'm putting my headphones on, so I can't hear you yet. How's that?
Good. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Can you hear us?
I can hear you fine. Let me see. I was hoping it would come through the computer. Let me try that again.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yep.
You can hear me now too. Okay. And is the sound okay? Does that sound
Yes,
okay?
yeah.
Is there a way for me to see myself? It would be good to position. I don't like when people have a half a face or something.
Let's see. There isn't a box in the top right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Is there an image of you up there?
No. I have it on too. On. And it would be great if I could see the students too. And if there is a possibility, Alice, of having them introduce, which group or something, that would be great.
Sure.
I liked your plan, Alice, for how we might go about doing this, and you could maybe just interview me to talk about, why I'm here, kind of thing.
Okay.
But it would be great to see them first to get a sense of them, because I've read all their papers and looked at their diagrams and all. So
we're seeing you clearly, and it's a good headshot. And we don't have it up on the projector yet, but we'll do that so they can see you.
Okay, good.
You'll also be able to see the room, and then when people speak to you, they'll come up to the mic and webcam. So I'll just show you a little bit of what the room looks like right now.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
I should be doing this. Sorry, should be watching. I apologize, David. I should have watched what I was doing.
No problem.
We're in a LEED certified building on campus.
We love LEED. We love Royal Roads. It's a great place.
You can probably see a bit of the out of doors there too.
Please send us some rain, please.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck is right. Well, they're getting the fires contained now, so.
That must be pretty scary.
Yeah, that's a little too close for us.
Why is it not hanging on the property? So as usual, David, I don't know what technology Fred will be hooked up to if we need to troubleshoot. So I'm hoping he'll be on, I don't know, FaceTime with you or email with me or something if we need to.
I've got my phone and all, so not to worry.
Okay.
My main concern is that the sound will be okay for them. So
yeah, I think it will be.
So? It will be okay? Okay.
It certainly will be with you anyway.
Okay. I'm going to just get a cup of coffee, and I'll be right back.
Sounds good. Thanks, David. So sorry for getting you confused.
Oh, no.
Haven't happened. Oh, yeah, tech guy.
Yeah, he's a foot taller than me. That's really the only difference.
That's so funny when you meet people when you've known them online for a while, and it's like, oh, you're tall.
Yeah. I was actually interviewed for this position via Blue Jeans.
Were you?
Yeah. So I didn't meet anyone until my first day at work. It's kind of bizarre.
One job I had was Marks. I've been working with the field offices for probably a year coffee.
Get these headphones in.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you need your headphones to hear us?
No, it's coming through the computer fine. I prefer it that way if we can do it
Okay.
that way.
Ah, there's Fred.
Fred's turn.
Yeah,
Maybe you want to troubleshoot with Fred first to make sure his audio and all are okay.
good idea.
But I'm good. I'm good to go.
All right. Fred, if you can hear us, you have your mic and your video muted right now. You just go to the right-hand side of the screen to your settings. You should be able to unmute those.
I guess if we were on as moderator, we could do that, right?
Yeah.
David,
Yo.
if you're connected with another technology with Fred, we're not sure he's hearing us, and Russ was asking him to unmute his mic and video.
Sure. Do you have his mobile number, Alice?
I bet I don't.
I'll send it to you right now. That'll probably obviate the extra step here. So just a second. Put it in the chat box.
Fred's under that room now.
Okay. So he's unmuted.
Yeah.
Can you,
Hey.
can you see us and hear us?
Yeah, you're kind of blurry, actually. It looks like maybe I need you.
Yeah. We'll fix that. The tech guy will fix
So
it.
when I tried joining before, I got a message saying I had to mute my picture and audio and video in order to join. And when I did that, I couldn't see how to undo it.
Okay, yeah. I'm sure that just asked you to do that in case there was feedback when you first joined. If someone new enters the room and there's a high volume level, it might create feedback. So
Okay, can we unblur us?
it'll just focus on its own. There we go.
That's good.
Yeah,
Hey,
now you're now totally cleared up. So
I'll give you a view of the room, Fred. So there's the outdoors on campus here. And here we are. We're in a fairly new LEED certified building here on campus. Yeah. So we'll start in a minute, and our general plan was for you two to introduce yourselves, but David wants me to interview him, so I'll do that, and you can introduce.
why don't you interview both of us, Alice? We could just have a three-way there. How about that?
Perfect. And then the teams are going to introduce themselves with a little bit about who they are and their process, and then, or is it process?
Process I like.
And then you can move into whatever it is you want to say about patterns and chapters and so forth. Okay, looks like we're good. I'm going to put this on. Um,
That was the thing. She like
Power.
so I was like, I was falling out.
I had it on earlier.
And checks looked at it. I can't come up with this. So like a wedding.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
And so whoever's speaking, you probably notice that they'll get the video feed as well.
Okay.
So if one person is going to speak for a while, the other person could mute their mic, and that'll stop from like a noise in the background interrupting the video feed.
Okay.
If that starts to happen.
Okay. So probably both of you heard that.
Got it.
Of course, remember to unmute. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day. Okay. So let's.
Thank you, Russ.
So we're done now?
Yeah. Fred, I can see you. I can't see myself. I don't know what I'm looking like here.
There you go. I can see you. So I'm actually outside, just so you know, if you want to see.
Nice. Florida.
There's a yard which is no longer underwater,
Sweet.
Oh,
no longer frog laden.
wow. And the hurricanes didn't do any serious damage to structures at your place?
We don't fully know that yet. I mean, they did, not to our house directly, but we're not sure what the water will be.
Right, right. Yeah, Fred is in Florida, as you can gather, and David's in fire country in Northern California. So they've had a few stressors down there. So as I think you all know, because I put it up on the flip chart before some of you came in, the plan was for David and Fred to introduce themselves with a little bit of context, and they've asked that I interview them instead. So we'll do that to start with. And then if one or more or all people from each team could come up and be more visible to them, they've requested that. They'd really appreciate that. And just tell them a little bit about yourselves, who you are, maybe why you were interested in the chapter you chose, maybe something about your process. It's totally up to you. I have to watch whether I say process or process with these guys, but they're flexible.
Oh, please.
Process, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was not prepared to interview you, but here I go. And I'm sorry that I'm blurry again. I don't know why that's happening. Let's see if we can get this focusing. Usually that works. You get me blurry today because I'm in the background.
Now you're
Tell us
focused.
all. I'd really appreciate each of you telling us a little bit about your identity. I've heard Fred talk about the identity of not being something, and I don't think I've ever heard you speak to identity, David. So let's start with Fred and talk a bit about, who you are in the world and how that might relate to these folks.
Yeah, so in a way, you already introduced me, and thank you for that, Alice. And I'm guessing the students know that we've worked together for many years.
They don't actually. I've been staying really low profile with my guests.
Okay. So to continue with the identity that Alice has given me. So my name is Fred Steyer. My doctorate actually from a program that no longer exists. That's part of what Alice was referring to. And it was a program in systems. It was called Social System Sciences. And it was at the business school, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. And the idea of the program, which totally connects with a lot of what it is that all the different teams wrote about, is how do you actually develop a way of learning at a university that really honors interdisciplinary connections and doesn't begin with the idea that a problem is defined only by what it looks like from a particular discipline's specialization. So it was very much rooted in fact, the very idea of wicked problems came from Wes Churchman, who was one of the people behind the program, although he wasn't formally in it. But the idea behind the program was that you could look at things in terms of interdependencies, in terms of how a system becomes a system and what's its relationship with its environment. So the ways that we did things were very much along the lines of action research, but really considering ideas of sustainability and leadership before we really started talking about sustainability and leadership. Just quickly, the other part of Alice's introduction to me, one of the things that's interesting by having a degree in systems, social system sciences, is that there are no programs that have that as a department anywhere pretty much in the world, but certainly not in North America. So I've had a career of moving through different programs, including engineering management, psychology, communication, anthropology, where I've always been defined as the other person. Right? So I'm always been not in the program that I'm in, which is both an advantage and a disadvantage in terms of being this liminal character. But it's also set up a space where throughout my career, I've actually been in very, very different environments, always getting back to questions of resilience and sustainability. And these included work with I was a research director at the Philadelphia Child Guidance Clinic, working with family therapists, seeing how problems that might have typically been seen as individual problems could be understood better within the context of the family. And I also, through work that I was doing at a Department of Engineering Management, where I was the head of the Center for Cybernetic Studies in Complex Systems, had a long-term project with NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, around knowledge sharing and ways of really recognizing how, and this was actually after the Challenger accident, that a lot of problems, including serious disasters like the Challenger accident, could be, rather than blaming a part, could be understood as how the culture of sharing knowledge wasn't really present in NASA. More recently, I've been working with a science center around designing exhibits that feature ecology and ecological learning in science centers in a more participatory fashion. And how do you actually bring what is now called design thinking to the design of a science center and understanding its relationship to communities? And then I've also been involved as an anthropologist. This will lead into David's introduction to a project that's based in Norway, where ideas of deep ecology are really the norm. And this was a project called the Overheating Project, which is looking at the ways, and it's ongoing, the ways in which how we talk about global warming and climate change, and how we talk about national identity and immigration, and how we talk about the financial crises can all be understood as systemic issues and share a lot of issues. So there's my life in about, I don't know, what is that, 4 minutes? But the thread connecting all of this is the background in systems, and that's why I very much appreciated some of your comments. So
Thank you, Fred. And
I worked with Alice before, so that's one of the things we've been trying to do, is to write together around bringing these ideas to the foreground of environmental leadership.
yes, yes. And I appreciate several things you said, Fred, including this idea of being other in an organization, because in talking with some of you one-to-one or in journals, I know some of you are, in a sense, other in your organizations. You have different perspectives or different goals or different backgrounds. So yeah, inspirational. Thank you, Fred. So that was a segue to you, David.
Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you, Fred. It's always a little hard act to follow when I hear your introductions, Fred. But we do have fun together, and I have to say that's a major part of this, is the enjoyment of the learning that's going on here. Yeah, I have identity, the other. My goodness, that's been most of my life, actually. I come from originally this middle land of Iowa in the United States, between the borders of the Mississippi and the Missouri River, and that really influenced me growing up. But and I also was very much influenced by Canada. My grandfather was Canadian, and we spent every summer on the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario on Lake Huron. So that had a great deal of influence on the development of my early identity. Spent a lot of time at that cabin out there that had been in the family for quite maybe 150 years or so. And I journeyed to the East Coast of the United States when I was 17 to finish out my high school at a private school out east called Exeter. And it was the biggest culture shock of my life by far. However, later I ended up going to an interdisciplinary work study college in Ohio called Antioch College, where we had credits for working as well as studying. My roommate there was Canadian, and he was homesick for India, where he'd grown up. So we went off to India for a couple of years. And it was in village India, living in a village in India, that I found some of my deep interests in systems and sustainability, and also, of course, leadership. That led me to the University of Chicago, where I studied anthropology and became very interested in originally well, in systems, we talk about diachronic and synchronic ideas. So, diachronic being over time, history. So you can think of it as an axis, I suppose. And then synchronic being right now, which is what anthropologists usually look at. So I like that combination of those two to look at those, and very, very interested in mobilities and all. Our plan was to go out to India overland and come back in 6 months, and they would give us work credit at Antioch College for that. 2 years later, I got back to the U.S. and yeah, I had some interesting journeys in Canada at that point too that I could talk about sometime. But it led me to try to discover what was going to be my career, and very quickly, after a couple of years of graduate school at the University of Chicago, I did an MA and started a PhD. I ended up teaching school in Yokohama, Japan. That was my first job. I had met a young lady under the cherry blossoms on my return trip from India, and that led me to go back to Japan to teach. And I consequently ended up living in Japan more than 33 years, have a home over there. And my identity is certainly very much tied with the Japanese side. Sometimes I'm more comfortable in Japanese than in English, in fact. And this going back and forth mobilities, and I continue to maintain research in southern India as well. So very, very interested in patterns, and particularly ideas of permeabilities and immunities. Those are interesting words that systems science is looking at more recently. I have work I did on what we call transcultural Japan, so the people who are moving across borders, very interested in that. And also work on reimagining Japanese education. And this has very much to do, both of these topics, with permeabilities and immunities. So, you know, the immigration discourse, the First Nations discourses, all of those things. How much are we going to accept of the other, and how much are we going to resist? So much of this is, again, using some systems ideas, circulation ideas, I suppose, and very interested in frames and flexibility. But like your papers, very much, especially around the ideas, systems ideas of phronesis, which is, you know, looking for the practical wisdom in it all. So, okay, I'll stop my introduction there, but there's more to it, of course, but onward.
Thank you very much. By the way, this group was outside this week earlier doing a little mini ethnographic exploration of the campus, looking at the culture of Royal Roads, perhaps in relation to sustainability. And there were some absolutely amazing insights, many of which had to do with permeability and boundaries. And just pick two examples. We have a combination of manicured gardens and very wild land here on the campus.
I've seen it. I've been there.
Oh, of course, yes. And so there was someone with a leaf blower making sure that all the needles from the fir trees were out of sight, sort of behind the tree. And there was an observation that programs don't mix here. There aren't places or incentives or encouragement for different programs to talk with each other, which matched their experience. And there were lots of others too, but it was pretty interesting. So what I'd like to do now is go on to teams briefly introducing themselves to you. And let's just quickly go through each team, and we'll do it, I think, in the order of the book chapters. So if someone or everyone from Paul Stillman's chapter, Team 7, could come up so that David and Fred can see you here, and then tell us a little bit about who you are and your experience doing this work. You'll come into focus. There you go.
Hi. So you want us to talk about who we did, or?
It
Yeah,
would be okay to introduce yourselves, yeah.
yeah.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I guess hard to follow your guys' instructions. I guess my background is mainly in contaminated sites work in consulting, and then most recently I'm kind of doing a groundwater program for a nonprofit organization. So that's kind of my background.
My name is Jonathan Reimer, and I'm a wildfire manager for Parks Canada, which is our big national park system.
Hi, and I'm Karen. I live in Vancouver, and I also do consulting work. And it was interesting how you said, both of you, that you're outsiders, because that's kind of how I feel in my organization, where I do a lot of work in different areas with biologists, but I'm not a biologist. I do work in solid waste management, but I'm not a solid waste management expert, and environmental planning, and I'm not a planner. And I kind of find that a really interesting thing that I do.
Yeah. Okay. Any brief comment on your process or work together, how you approached it?
Yeah, so our approach was we all read the chapter and then discussed it, and then one of us kind of took a stab at the portion of the writing, and then we kind of got back together and discussed it again, and then meanwhile somebody worked on the model, and we did kind of a similar approach, so collaborative kind of edit, review, discuss, and then finalize. So that was our
Wonderful.
approach. Yeah.
Thank you, Team 7. So as the other teams introduce themselves, highlight anything that is quite different about your process. And so we'll be going to Team 1 now with Kevin, its chapter.
Hi there. Yeah, so we took Kevin's chapter, and all of us come from sort of a science background, so we're all in the Masters of Science stream. But we were interested in Kevin's chapter because we do deal with sustainability in our day-to-day, and so understanding the values and ideals and possibly getting some insights on what motivates people and in the realm of sustainability and environmental management was interesting to us. And so we actually collectively did work quite collaboratively as a team in terms of kind of coming together, discussing the chapter and synthesizing our write-up together. And we also kind of whiteboarded out collectively our systems diagram and sort of all contributed to it. So.
And can you introduce yourself?
Sorry.
Well, that was lovely. I'm not complaining.
My name's Haley O'Neill. I live in Victoria, and I too work for an environmental consulting company as kind of jack of all trades, but mainly ecologist, biologist.
Hey, I'm Cassandra Murphy. I live up in Terrace, British Columbia, up north in the province, and I work with an environmental consulting company as well, and we focus on environmental monitoring of large-scale construction projects and fisheries and stream work for women.
And I'm Larry McCurry, and I work with Parks Canada on the Bison Reintroduction Project.
I'm Lee Ross from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and I work with streamflow and real-time streamflow, getting the data on the web.
Thank you very much. And as I think you know, David and Fred, yeah, come on up next team, which would be Karen's chapter, so Team 6. Some of the teams have had feedback from their authors, and some have had time to incorporate it, and some are in the process of that. So here we have Karen's big private sector folks. Go ahead.
Hello.
I'm Monica. I'm an auditor with provincial government.
Allison Tyndall. I work in Calgary for an oil and gas company. I do auditing on some systems and then environmental and regulatory compliance.
Darren, I'm also from Calgary, work for an oil and gas company dealing with air regulatory issues.
I think we're all interested in this chapter because we all have experience and deal with sort of executive types and boards on a very regular basis. So thinking about sustainability, we were very interested in how we could use some of the information in the chapter to influence board members and executive types to think about incorporating sort of sustainability thinking and systems thinking into their work. I think we actually split the group up when we did our work. Half the group kind of summarized the chapter and the other half did the systems work. But it was interesting in the systems work as well. We had very different ways of thinking about the system. And so we ended up submitting a few ideas of how we saw things coming together. So yeah, it was a really good experience.
Just a quick question, not to violate our process, because we've been just good listeners, but since you've been in touch with Karen, I mean, you might envision, since each of you also works with a board, how Karen's ideas might also help you. So kind of pre-consulting from Karen is what I was thinking of.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have reached out to her, and she's been very receptive and provided us with her contact information and actually additional resources as well. But yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Some people have asked me, why are we doing this assignment? And I'm hoping that these things pop up. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. So on to Carol's chapter, Team 8. There are interesting gender dynamics here. People did get mostly their first pick of chapter or second.
Shift over.
Morning, Fred. Morning. My name is Jesse. I work with Parks Canada. I'm involved in project management. So concepts of organizational sustainability and leadership are central to more or less what I'm involved in.
My name is Charles Grimm. I work in air emissions, mostly consultation services. I was interested in this chapter because I work directly under the CEO, and I'm kind of interested in how CEO's beliefs affect an organization.
My name is Joe. I work in waste and recycling. I manage a landfill, recycling, and composting facility just south of Calgary. And yeah, we chose this as we were all interested in how leaders can influence organizations and and how their sustainability practices and how they interact with the environment. So kind of our process was we each read the article ourselves separately, and then we kind of had a joint Google Doc that we broke up kind of key questions, and we each added our thoughts independently. So it kind of put together all our thoughts in one place. Then we met and kind of tried to make that flow and progress smoothly. And then we basically had brunch together the one day and did all the systems diagramming. By the end of it, we had about 10 different pieces of paper on the table with all these different arrows pointing every which direction. And that was a really interesting process to work through because we all kind of saw different connections and different interactions. And so it was good to all get together, especially over brunch.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So who's next? Steve Shine's chapter, Team 5. I don't know. It looks like there are only 2 of the 3 of you. There you go. Yeah. However you want to do this.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. I'm Zhongbo from Tianjin, China, and I have been working the Board of Tianjin Environmental Protection Office.
Hi, I'm Bridget Doyle. I work for First Nation Community and Governance and Environmental Stewardship Consultation.
Good morning, I'm Amélie Moret. I live in Dawson City, Yukon, and I do environmental and socioeconomic assessments of projects that take place on Crown land or settlement.
I'm Charles Monroe. I'm from Ontario originally, and I am a student at the moment.
That's a typical Charles introduction. A little bit about your process.
What would be an atypical Charles introduction? Could you give us one?
Oh, that could be a game to play.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Let's party.
That was atypical. So we've got, 2 countries, and if we call nations countries, 3 here. And so anything about your process you want to share?
In terms of our process, we worked pretty collaboratively throughout the whole thing. We had divided some of the work in terms of doing the summary, and then we came together and edited it together. And our systems diagram was very much a collaborative effort of just sitting in front of the whiteboard and working through working through the different ideas.
Yeah, it was pretty harmonious.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and now we've got Joanne Clark's Team 4.
Oh, there we go. Hi.
Another gender balanced team.
Yeah. Well, not surprising maybe on the topic. Yeah. Hi, I'm Carol Slaughter. I'm from Whitby, Ontario. I work in the waste division for regional government. Hi, I'm Norma Hogan. I'm from Switzerland originally. I live in BC here now. I work in the digital public engagement sphere.
Okay.
And I'm Carrie Zeller. I work in independent retail for agriculture products, and with them, I look after the soil fertility and nutrient planning for a crop, and also the integrated pest management for insect and disease cycles.
Okay.
So the chapter that we undertook, we chose primarily because I think we're interested in the entrepreneurship side of things. Two of my cohorts are interested in that side of business in that field. We also, from my perspective, I've been on that side, so it's not really as interesting for me. However, I found that the background in terms of how they approached the starting of a small business, or the review of these individuals who are in a community and what the impact that they were having of starting a small business in a community, and just in terms of how they approach those things and what the impacts from an environmental standpoint, because you're dealing in Calgary, which from that perspective is a much more difficult environment. We felt that in terms of looking at running a sustainable business model would be interesting. So in terms of our process, is pretty similar to what everyone else has been saying. We all read it and we all got together. We did divvy it up a little bit, but we worked on the systems diagram together, and then also we found there's actually a lot of cohesion in terms of our interest in the topic and even our approaches. So it was actually really smooth collaborative work. We took a whiteboard and it was done in about 10 minutes.
That's an atypical Carol response. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and so John Fisher's chapter, Team 2. Nice to hear ideas of application percolating out of this.
Hi, I'm Lois Miller, originally from Newfoundland, and I primarily work in industry, typically an environmental manager, jack of all trades, so I'm looking at compliance projects primarily.
I'm Marika. I live here in Victoria. My background is soil biology, and I run a small nonprofit organization which educates the community about urban sustainability practices.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Matt. I used to be a consultant like many of the people in the classroom, but now I am an environment manager for the territory of British Columbia. What do? I guess I do audits and compliance, research and development of everything from mining all the way to distribution of our products. And the hardest part is dealing with people. So I think that's kind of why we picked this chapter, which is called Making Sense of Sustainability, How Sustainability Managers Make Meaning and Take Action. Because people are difficult and I don't know how to take action. So
he has done metaphors with penalty boxes.
Yes, yeah, you can't give humans in the real world.
A hockey player then, huh?
Yeah, I played hockey and lacrosse and ref both of them as well. So the translation is not good into the career sense.
But that helps with our process. He's a ref.
Yeah.
So he refereed our team.
Okay, thank you.
We need more referees.
Yeah. And then the final chapter, where I hear rumored that the author has been unavailable, is Team 3.
I'm missing one.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Timothy. Timothy Asniam. I'm from Cameroon. My background is in rural water management.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm from Vancouver, but I currently live down in Sausalito, and I work at the Marine Mammal Center, which is a nonprofit marine mammal rescue rehabilitation research facility. And there I am, I was identifying with you saying the outsider as well, because I just, as Matt has called me, the Michelle of all trades, I just kind of capture everything and try and make things happen there, essentially. And so the chapter was really interesting for me because I face boundaries all the time at work, and how some people are much more receptive and some people are not as receptive, and trying to make changes and get information flowing across them. So that's why it was really good to me.
Can you see the artwork on Michelle's t-shirt?
I wanted to ask, Michelle, please tell us about your shirt, the narwhals. I love it.
Oh, it's just the narwhal unicorn of the sea. I have actually truly found people in California who do not know that narwhals are real creatures. So I try to promote narwhal education as much as I can.
Hi, I'm Colleen Marlowe. I'm a forester and a consultant. I do a lot of work in information management and policy work with cross-boundary agencies. So that was the obvious connection for the chapter with me. Yeah, I was really interested in how to get the information across between government and private working groups.
Good morning, Melody Lapine. I'm originally from a small community in northeastern Alberta called Fort Chipewyan. I work for my community, a First Nation called the Mikisew Cree, and I'm basically responsible for interfacing with government and industry on very complex, challenging issues within the oil sands. So I'm responsible for mitigating and addressing a lot of the community's concerns. What really drew me to Alice's chapter was, I think, just understanding leadership and the importance of leadership and boundaries and that permeability that you mentioned in sustainable, more effective leadership and sustainability.
As a team, we read the chapter together and brought all of our opinions into the table, and then really edited our response all together as a team. And sorry, excuse me. And then as well for the systems, we had originally come up with one idea and realized that that surface wasn't allowed to be permeable. A heart really can't be permeable. Chambers. So then we had to rejig our plan and came up with a different system design. Yeah. And David, it was interesting because you mentioned Exeter, and just a personal note, I actually took a course from Exeter with World Wildlife Fund, the One Planet Leadership Program. So it was, I hadn't heard that name in a long, long time, so it was just cool to hear.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think that deserves a thank you to all of you. So you're getting a sense of how people worked and who they are, quite a diversity in terms of sectors and roles, but I would say a lot of common ground in the area of caring about the natural environment and about social justice as well often, and some amazing stories we've heard about how these people are finding ways to be effective in sometimes difficult environments. So I'd like to open it up to you, David and Fred, and however you'd like to approach it. You two are used to working together, know each other pretty well. We said we'd wrap up at 10, and I don't know if either of you have the option of extending a little bit if it feels like we need it. But let's start off. I'll flag at about 5 minutes to 10, and we'll see how we're doing. And yeah, just go ahead, start with whoever you want to start with and approach it however you would like to. I'm going to flip the camera around so that you're seeing people in the room and vice versa.
So Alice, I just had a question for the group that, if we tried to answer it now, it would take up the rest of the time. But particularly because, so the last group is working with Alice McGillivray's chapter. I'm wondering that one of the things that struck me as very important in the ways that people presented both the diagrams and the text the frame, because we also talked about frames and flexibility. Was it intentional that people wrote in a way or did this in a way that the authors could learn something about their own work? In other words, there's a difference, and this is totally connected to ideas of sustainability applied to itself. There's a difference between taking a chapter as the kind of, the Bible in a sense, right? And saying we need to understand it, compared to saying, let's work with the author of this in a way that allows us to learn from what they were doing, but they might even learn from our questions. And so I'm not asking that that be addressed, but that's something that it seemed like many of the groups actually had that as a frame to invite sort of a continuity of learning rather than just deciphering a text. That's just a comment that I had.
It's a lovely comment. And I think am I echoing? I think it's good that we're seeing a range of, let's not take it in stone. Let's think about the future. Let's think about the present. Let's think about different contexts. And I think the skills are developing nicely in this group with that. So great question. And as you probably noticed, a great cybernetics kind of question, right? A loop of learning. Yeah, thanks. So
I'll jump in here a little bit too. It seems to me that Fred's comments really get to the notion of relational work or relational learning versus transactional work or learning. And so many of you are consultants, which of course involves, about compliance and regulatory work and all, which is very transactional. At the same time, speaking here towards the authors and how important this relational part of it all is. And clearly you have established quite the great relational community environment there for yourselves. So, many kudos for you on doing that. And I did have individual comments on papers and all kind of typical teacher kind of approach, but I'm more interested in the dialogue with you all about, what Fred has just mentioned, how authors might learn something about their own work. And it's great that you've been in touch with people. Wow, what a wonderful learning experience here.
You don't know the culture of fielding, and these folks both work with fielding, and I know it's awkward that you have to kind of get up to a mic, but just go for it, go with the flow. If you feel like saying something, asking something, go for it.
Well, since I'm already on the front, I thought the authors would gain some perspective on our feedback, because we'd be telling them what we thought of their chapter, but they might get the feedback and say, really, like, that's what you thought? Like, I was meaning this, or you guys interpreted that way. Sure. And so that's what I thought we might learn from the feedback, is saying we thought it was this, or if they see our systems diagram, you thought it worked that way. Well, I wasn't thinking of that. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe they'll say, oh, I never thought of that. Or maybe they'll say, I need to refine how I wrote that because it's being misinterpreted.
Yeah, that's helpful.
I'll take that. I'll roll away.
I would guess that all the authors would be open to that and willing to speak to that. So if you didn't get anybody saying you're off base, my guess is you weren't off base. What's your sense? You've worked with all these people, Fred and David.
I think it would be great and certainly be in touch with all of them. Even maybe compile something from all of you that we could share with all of the authors. I think, they're talking with each other too. These are not separate, discrete chapters. People looked at each other's chapters and commented on them. It was such an interesting process editing this book. I might note too that on Amazon, it comes up as Karen Bogart being the editor, but actually Fred and I were editors along with Paul Stillman. So it's a kind of interesting process that happens on that one. But we had chosen as the subtitle for this, Integrating Values, Meaning, and Action. And hopefully that has come through out here too, but perhaps a compiled statement from all of you. Just terrific. I sure enjoyed reading the comments.
Just to add to that, I mean, this part of my question is some intentionality to this. the authors were interested not just in getting the word out there, but in learning from other people. In a way, I mean, one of the important systems ideas that I think most of you also is the notion of recursion, and how you, in writing a book about sustainability leadership, how you would apply this principle to the book itself. And that would, and where that comes in, what a lot of you were talking about, this opens up to learning, both with the board, for example, that Aaron was working with the universities that Paul was working with. So how to see these same principles enacted in what it is that you are actually doing. And it actually, you know, it becomes a very experience about, rather than just writing, how does this become a space of learning? In a sustainability program, particularly one where you have, you know, in your own groups, you have scientists, you have policy people, you have communication people, you have management. And how do you actually recognize that what an organization that's committed to sustainability, what it looks like and feels like, is different from those different perspectives. So how all of you come together, I think, was really, you know, quite impressive. I did have one other thought. At the beginning, Alice, you mentioned this project of looking at walking around culture of it. And I'd love to hear more about what you did with that. As an aside, I actually teach a class on design thinking. And one of the things that we're doing is looking at university as a learning space, but what are the missed learning opportunities? And actually thinking about how to transform a university so that the same principles of sustainability leadership might be applied to how we think about design of learning spaces, like your classroom. Things like the presence of whiteboards, although trees don't like to have whiteboards. But how to just think about all of these together with learning.
Does anyone who came up with an idea about improved learning on campus want to come up and take it a step farther and share what this place might look like if you could wave a magic wand and change one thing based on what you saw?
I think there was a good comment. I didn't come up with it, but whoever came up with the inter-program thing.
Can you hear Matt from where you are, Fred and David?
Okay.
Actually, I couldn't see who was talking, but I could hear the voice.
So this is my idea. Messing up as to who came up with it. No worries. At the beginning of every year, we actually do something called an inter-cohort activity. So everyone that's in the environment management program, there's 3 cohorts here at the same time. So right now it's 2015, 16, and 17. And it's interesting to see basically the differences in culture between each of those, and we kind of intermix just so everyone, you know, can learn from the third years. Not that we have that much that's constructive, but just kidding, they're great. But it would also be interesting to see if we could maybe do that between the programs. So, you know, if there were some commerce people or communications people, interdisciplinary folks, if we could all mingle together, it may give the overall campus a better sense of community, so it would be less siloed in programs. You could kind of bridge it over. But once again, I think someone in here came up with that. It wasn't me, but I thought that was a fantastic idea. And that's it.
So Fred and David, other observations. I know you've done more detailed work, David, but maybe we can start taking a couple of minutes with patterns you noticed. And then I think teams would like it if there was a little bit of detail as well.
Sure. Happy to. I'm getting a little on my side. Maybe I should use my headphones. Just try that. It might be less of an echo from my side. Again, feedback loops. One observation right at the onset here is vocabulary is, and finding you know, a list, a glossary, something like that. I think that would be helpful to everybody. Is that better? Yeah, it's still a little bit of feedback, but it's okay. And feedback, I'm also thinking about the aesthetic sides of all of this. You know, for example, electronic feedback was then utilized. You know, it sounded like dissonance and everything, but then it was utilized by people like Hendrix and Eric Clapton to bring an aesthetic side to the whole thing. And I think there is that piece of it too, which was maybe not touched on so much. Well, your diagrams of the iceberg, of course, following up on Donella Meadows, I thought was touching on that. Certainly looking at the holistic aspects of all of this, and particularly within the holistic aspects, where the power dynamics might be. Some of you alluded to this, but certainly hegemony or hegemony, I think it's pronounced both ways, by the way, and the hierarchies that might be there. And I'm very touched by all of the different projects that you all have that you're involved with, particularly those around the cycling and circulations that are happening out in the environment, whether it's between communities and what's happening with industry and all. So I think it was mentioning from her community, the kind of community work that's going on there, but then also the waste recycling and all. It's something that's very much on my mind right now are plastics. We have a community near us, Davis, University of California, Davis, Community of Davis, just recently banned plastic straws. Very bad for the environment, but the whole idea that how plastics are dominating our environment, how easily we go to those disposable spoons or forks or whatever, and how action seems to be behind all of your papers, and again the phronesis idea, looking for the practical wisdom in all of this. I really enjoyed that part of what we have here. And utilizing this connections that you have with each other, I think is really helpful. I see a lot of emergence going on here in your groups, and you must be talking a lot with each other. And oh my goodness, aren't you lucky that you have a facilitator, a faculty person taking you outside? We need to do more of that, because we do have these common kinds of spaces that we need to give more attention to. And I had highlighted sections that I thought of your individual papers that are particularly interesting. I'd be happy to send those back to you, Alice. But those are just a few kind of initial thoughts from my side.
Okay, thank you, David. Fred, over to you with patterns you'd like to share.
Yeah, so I actually had, I might have to disable, note that connection, so I might have to disable like in a minute, but then you can still hear me.
By the way, your sound is breaking up a bit. Do you by any chance have headphones there you can put on?
Not within the time, by the time I found them.
That's fine, thanks.
But you can still hear me, okay?
Yeah, I think when you're closer to the mic, it's better.
Okay, so this is just kind of a teacherly comment that, how we think about our systems diagrams in ways that might actually help us and also help those who might be working with. And so a question that I have is, what is it that goes into representation for something to become a systems diagram? And one of the things that all of your diagrams share is that you have a lot of arrows. You have to show how things connect. But in looking at them, it's not clear that the arrows are all doing the same thing, that they all mean the same thing. So what I would encourage you to do is to go back to your diagram. If I would put a label on the arrows, what is it that they're actually doing? What action are they inviting? And it's not just a strong connection or a weak connection, but is it leads to, is it brings about, yeah, so just that's a general comment about the diagrams.
I have a question that was just posed to me earlier this morning that I'd like to pose to both of you. And it was around the purpose or value of the kind of work they've done in this assignment, because on the surface, it seems simple. You take a chapter in a book and you write a summary sort of thing and you draw something. and it might turn into a submission to a journal. But when the two of you look at this assignment, what sorts of possibilities or nuances do you see?
I'll jump in here on that one. If I again, I'm getting the feedback. Sorry. Back to this, but what are the nuances we see? I think that this practicality of it, again, going back to that, really important in what come up with. Certainly, one of the ways to come into the academy, to break into the academy, or even I think as professionals having a responsibility to our professions, is to do reviews of work. And that's what you've done. You've basically not done a book review, you've done a chapter review. And all of your patterns were rather similar, I thought. And you look first at what the person in the chapter, and then you go drill down to some really key ideas, and then you provided some critique as well, which is rather a typical book review and or article review, and there are plenty of opportunities for doing that. Publishing is a good way to get your voice out there in the landscape, and then often people will go from doing those kinds of book reviews or chapter reviews or whatever onto an article themselves. And much of it, of course, is about dialogue. And again, as I don't know if you can see the chat box, but the dimensionality and frames, I think, are really important in this. And this is something Fred has done a lot of work on, frame flexibility.
Yeah, I think someone actually wrote a response to a paper on frame flexibility that I learned quite a lot. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So are you both hearing and seeing all right? We're not seeing you anymore, Fred, but we're hearing you just fine.
I turned my video off because I was getting a message the connection was unstable. And if I turn the video off, then it's a stronger connection.
Good point.
And I'm sure you're tired of viewing.
Okay. So, yeah, so David, thank you for the offer to send more detailed comments in. We're getting close to 10 o'clock and we were hoping for some dialogue. Let's see if you can encourage these folks to engage a bit on something that you'd like them to think about, because who knows if we'll ever be in the same place again.
Wow, that's a really interesting idea there. Well, I would love to have that. I wish I was in the room with you all. And of course, rooms are interesting too, and how they're set up. I imagine railroads you do a fair amount of circles also, and having that kind of learning too.
It depends on the program.
Depends on the program. Okay, well, I think those learning spaces are really important to reflect on too. By the way, what I have done is I've highlighted in different colors in the papers thoughts that I have. But wow, you've got a lot of expertise in the room too, and particularly in the sense of experiential expertise that would be great to put something together that would help the larger publics that are out there that are in need of some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I can't speak for Fred or David's schedules or willingness or availability specifically, nor the chapter authors. But this, the idea is still out there. If some of you want, for whatever reason, for professional development reasons or whatever, to work on taking this a step further, I'd be happy to work with a couple of you. And there may be other spin-offs that come out. I mean, I find once you get into this world of being both a scholar or an emerging scholar and a practitioner, it's sort of like edges in nature, like more and more possibilities bubble up about things you might do, things you might collaborate on, ways in which you might share perspectives from your part of the world or country. So keep an open mind. I hope you think of this assignment over time, not just as an assignment, but perhaps a springboard to collaboration with your author or team members or some similar idea or applying the skills. So, yeah, what would people like to ask Fred or David while they're here? Because, okay, Charles.
Hello again, guys.
Hi, Joe.
Hey. How familiar are you guys with Steve Shine's chapter?
Steve is our great. I was actually on his feet. And one note too about all of these chapters, they emerged from PhD dissertations, but it was very important that they write something that was different from the dissertations themselves. Yeah, and we're both close, or all of us close with Steve and on his work. You've seen his book also. He had a book that emerged out of his, which is unusual. That doesn't.
I'm not familiar. Actually, the first time I've heard of him was during this assignment, and which was great to learn about him. He's a very impressive guy. I was just wondering on the chapter in this book specifically, if you're familiar with the kind of the questions he asked the different executives in sustainability positions. Well, my group, we kind of talked about how we saw some of those in ourselves, and I was wondering if you and Fred found the same sort of pattern.
Oh, yes, I certainly think so, Fred.
No, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, my goodness. And I'll note, too, for all of you, we'd be happy to send dissertations. I think we have the full dissertations for many of these people. I mean, I don't remember, Fred, which committee you were on, but I was on Shines and Kevin's, and Carol's, and Joanne's. I think, Fred, you were on committees too, right?
Yeah, Karen, Paul, Alice.
And these folks do still have Royal Roads Library access, so they can also, if they're interested, go in while they're still students and access the dissertations that way.
Oh, good. Happy to send them directly, but of course in an appendix there will be the interview protocols too for the sorts of questions that they ask.
So it sounds like you have a further question, Charles, that you're wondering how to ask or
No, I'm just listening.
Oh, why were you curious about the questions that Steve asked?
Oh, I was just wondering because I thought they were interesting. It was a cool, it was just cool because I did see them. Like they were the 5 questions. I forget all of them, but it was like things that environmental managers have in common about their beliefs. And like one of them was they find like nature spiritual. One of them was like they've seen environmental degradation in other countries. And then there were, I guess, 3 more. But they were all kind of consistent among all of the 40 or 60 people interviewed, and we found similar traits among ourselves. So I was just wondering,
Great. One note on the background of the questions. Steve actually, like many of you, in industry with environmental managers for many years. So he had tremendous connections, but he also had the trust that from the experiences and work that he had done in the sector. I mean, he knew these folks. So that really helped. He wasn't coming in cold as somebody that they've never seen this work. And I think there was a mutual, intent, a mutual set of goals that those folks had that he interviewed as well as he interviewed. But I encourage you to look at his book. It's published out of England. I think Greenleaf Publishers is the name. I'll look it up and put it in the chat box. I don't know if you're seeing the chat box or not, but one other thought, for you all to consider going to professional conferences for your work. And I'm mentioning here in the chat box the Society for Applied Anthropology, which is an interdisciplinary conference. It's not just anthropology. We have lots of folks just like all of us in the room here. And they just call for papers for the next until the end of October. The conference is 3rd through 7th, 2018 in Philadelphia. It is a wonderful conference to go to, and you could put a panel together. Even undergraduates sometimes present at this conference. It's not a stiff, very formal, exclusive kind of professional organization.
And don't let the anthropologists throw you off. But keep in mind a lot of anthropology happens in organizations, and you've been doing some of it here. So yeah, good suggestion. Time for one more question, and then we'll have a chance for David and Fred to say whatever they'd like to. Yeah, Nicole.
Hi. I did Paul Stillman's chapter, and one of his comments for feedback from us was we didn't include the kind of phrenesis. Is that I'm saying right? The phrenesis link. So I'm wondering if you could kind of. It's the first time I've ever heard of that term. I don't know how much it was used in the rest of the book, but I'm just kind of curious if you could maybe elaborate a bit more on it, and maybe some kind of examples or applications of it would be really great.
Yeah, I can answer that. If you're asking about that, he would probably tell you that I pushed him on that somewhat annoying fashion. And it comes. I mean, the term is actually from Aristotle, so it has a long in terms of ways. What it really encourages to think about, and I saw this in response, is a way of knowing involves practical knowledge, practical wisdom, and how knowledge connects to practical praxis. And very much your program is really about being a scholar and practitioner at the same time. So the idea for me, going back to Aristotle, there's a way that our hands grow. There's a way that trees know that becomes very important in terms of thinking about an entire ecosystem. And so how to bring that as a way of knowing into the dissertation that's about sustainable programs, very important. I don't know if that helps you. Also, a lot of ideas in actual research, for example, also making some ideas funny. How is our contribution actually contributing to ways of acting?
So we caught part of that, but I think there'll be some exploration of phrenesis in the
interesting. I think we explore that concept, but I've never heard it referred to as that term. So that's great. Thank you.
And I feel kind of both privileged and awkward when I hear comments from you, from teams, from individuals, from the whole group. But I found this language thing really interesting, because this is, whether you have time to comment, David or Fred, I find this program and the programs at Royal Roads, most of them, really interesting in that they're framed as applied academic programs. They're not framed as professional programs. So it's not like it's an MA or an MSc you're getting. It's not a MEM that you're getting, even although you talk about masters in environmental management. And so there's, in most people's minds, an expectation in an MA or an MSc that you do have a foot in each camp. You're a scholar and you're a practitioner, and you know something about the big ideas and the whys behind the practice. And so we bumped up against this, Fred and David, a few times, where people hear a word, it might be a new word like perhaps syntony or praxis or phrenesis or ontology, and they have a reaction, and the reaction might be, oh, that's exciting, or what is that, or who is this jerk using this big word when there must be simpler ones, or whatever. So it's and I of course have inherited the most multidisciplinary or sometimes transdisciplinary course in the whole program. So it's been kind of fun to explore that stuff and explore our own reactions. So any final comments from the two of you before you head off to your other interesting lives?
Yeah, thanks so much, Alice. Wow, I reflect in here using the terms just of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and of course transdisciplinary. And language is so important. So thinking about inter, for example, many years ago, I decided I didn't like the word international. Living in Japan for a long time and also being from the United States, being from North America. International seems to apply someplace in the middle of the ocean in between, whereas multi, well, at least it's acknowledging the diversity there. On the other hand, transdisciplinary speaks for motion, movement, and how important it is in all of this. I also want to note here about scholars and practitioners. I have always valued both. I think the work of the hands is as important as the work of the mind, and why they can't work together, and why they are divided, and why the academy, for example, largely disdains the work of the hand, putting things into applied, and it's sort of demoted somehow. Theory is put up there. Well, I think it's not useful for us as a species to have this. We certainly need to have more practical approaches to what's going on out there. So I want to, at the end here, just note that value that you're bringing to what's going on, and to value your voices, your background, your language. Don't be intimidated by what seems like big words and this kind of thing. And there is a great site. I don't know if you can see it if I share it on my screen here. It looks like I can't quite share my screen, but that site that I just put in the text box about phronesis, also the concept of praxis too, I think is a really important one for all of you. And praxis is what you're doing, what you're about, and this is a really interesting and important one that's out there. And also Fred's note about how a tree knows, how a fish knows, those kinds of things. We're only beginning to understand that. There was a report yesterday, I think one of you mentioned, was it Michelle, you're interested in marine mammals. They are discovering that dolphins and whales have culture, that they act in ways like humans, which we didn't, we don't quite expect. I mean, they're intelligent animals, but we don't expect them to be having culture. But, from the time of Jane Goodall looking at the chimpanzees using tools and tool culture, there are many more things that we need to learn. And we especially need to hear voices from folks like your good selves, as we say in India. So.
Alice?
Oh, and I like silences very much. Having lived in Japan for a long time, there are a lot of silences, which as a North American, I was very uncomfortable with originally. But no, it's a very good thing to have some silent spaces.
I had put my mute on, Fred, in order to give David some silence. No, I wish I'd been that. Correct. Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Actually, Alice, now that you're talking, I can see the big screen. And I was wondering where your eyes were directed. I'm looking in the class, but they're looking away. But having worked in Norway, I'm used to that. So
that's lovely.
I did have one final thought, which is really meant to be an opening to additional work rather than just closing the talk. One of the other things reading the is how we deal with sustainability and sustainable leadership when the domains in which we're thinking about sustainability actually come into conflict with each other. And most noticeably for a lot of projects now, it becomes things like, is this about economic sustainability and jobs, or is this about environmental sustainability? And what happens when those two ideas about sustainability actually clash? And if people are interested in it, I'm thinking that because someone, I forgot the name of the person who said this, someone who worked at the tar sands in northern Alberta, part of the overheating project, and I can send you more information about this, Alice, one of the projects that's connected to the overheating project that I mentioned, there's actually an ethnographic study that was based in Lac La Biche. It was a woman who actually stayed in Lac La Biche before the fires in Fort McMurray, working with First Nations groups there around choices between sustainability of jobs and sustainability of their environment. And how do you actually negotiate? Because what made me think of this is a lot of you were looking at creating spaces for dialogue around sustainability, but how do you actually create that space when ideas of economic sustainability and environmental sustainability may, for example, not coincide? I don't have an answer to that, but it's certainly something that we need to think about, and I think it's something that your program probably foregrounds, Alice. So just to leave that as a thought.
Thank you very much, Fred. I don't know if Melody's familiar with that study, but I think she'll be interested if she isn't. Were you involved? No? Okay, so we do have someone who might have been involved, but she'll be one of the people keen on that. So I'd like to thank you both very much for lots of things, starting with the offer that you made to edit that monograph, help to design it, put it together, get the intersection of these two fields out there, because we need more of it, in my view, and for spending time not only in this hour and a bit today, but to take a look at the work that this group is doing. And I look forward to the thoughts you send afterwards, David, which is it okay with everyone if you just send them as a block and I share all of them with everybody? Are we meta collaborative? Excellent. Okay.
Oh, sure. I think people looking at each other's as well. And again, I just highlighted some sections, but yeah, good fun. And in the chat box, again, I don't know if people can see the chat box, but I put Steve Shine's connections and all. So.
We are not seeing your entries to the chat box, but unless, oh, yeah, I put it on earlier and nothing was showing up.
If there's a way to save it, because there's some links there that might be helpful to people.
Right.
Okay. I'm not sure how to save it from my side.
I'm not either.
Russ here.
And I'm not seeing the Steve Shine. Anyway, we at least one person in this room used Steve Shine's book in their thesis, and we they and everybody have his work site, his web address, and so forth. Yeah, I'm just not seeing. Yeah, it looks like this is earlier stuff. Whoops. No. If there's something important that I haven't mentioned, we already have access to. Just send it to me in an email. Oh, there we go. I think. Now those are your notes about participants. Anyway, yeah, we'll figure this out. And thank you so much again. So let's give a bit of an audio thank you to David and Fred. And we'll be in touch. Take care.
Thanks, Alice, for studying.
Thanks so much, Alice. Great to see you, Fred. Everybody. Great to see you all.
Alice. See you, David.
See you. Bye.
Bye.